Chrissy Teigen once tweeted, "I've gone my entire life without saying the N-word. Not when singing a song, not out loud, not in my head. It really isn't that hard. The trick is to just not say it. And boom, you've never said it, and there's no tape of you saying it." My name is Emily Nouse, and today I'd like to talk to you all about the Schnatter dispute that took place here at Ball State University in August of 2018. Today I'm going to be talking about a little bit of the details of the case, some of the aspects of organizational communication that Ball State kind of failed to comply with, and I'm also going to talk about some of the current research and how that relates to either the aspects that Ball State failed to comply with and some case recommendations that I think would have helped Ball State in this situation. So this all started when the Board of Trustees decided to keep the Schnatter name on the entrepreneurial building here at Ball State University. Schnatter had used the N-word during a meeting, and overall there was a lot of negative feedback from that, obviously because it is such horrible language that should never be used. But also, there's this name that is now bad, and just someone who's used such a horrible word, but it's still being used in an institute where one of their biggest values is their commitment to diversity. There's a lot of negative feedback coming from students and staff after this position. However, it all worsened once President Mearns even backed up the decision made by the board. So already you're having so much resistance from students and staff. So obviously there's some communication lacking, where students and staff are saying that, there's none of the values are actually being practiced while the board is making these decisions going against the values. It's actually pretty interesting to look into. But there's also some more organizational flaws within that. The board decided to reverse their decision and ultimately took Schnatter's name off the institute. So in the end, they did make the right decision. However, that original decision, really pointed out some obvious flaws within the organization of Ball State University. And that's what we're going to be really talking about today. One of the first things that went wrong was the idea of the strong culture. Strong culture is referenced in Miller's book of Organizational Communication Approaches and Processes, written in 2015. 3 aspects of strong culture are rites and rituals that go on within the organization, values that are reinforced and practiced, and heroes within the organization that are kind of seen as images of the ultimate Ball State member in this case. A lot of people might think of David Letterman or someone like that. However, within the strong culture at Ball State University, this decision lacked the reinforced values, and you can tell once that's gone, it kind of stops an organization from working. A teacher even mentioned this from the English department, I should say professor from the English department, Jeffrey Brackett. He mentioned that the abhorrent language used by Schnatter was not in line with BSU's values, particularly their commitment to diversity. Again, if a university values diversity but supports someone who uses language that is hateful and just overall just full of bigotry, there's some discrepancy between reinforcing the values of Ball State. So that's one flaw that the Board of Trustees had when making this decision. Another interesting concept within all this is resistance to change. Miller defines it normally as the people within the organization who resist change, never really the people at the head of an organization resisting change, which is why this case is so interesting, because it's actually the Board of Trustees resisting change. Resistance happens if there's a lot to lose, and in this case, there's $3.25 million that would be lost at the university. It was the board that was scared to lose this money overall, and the students and staff are more than willing to lose this money if this means representing the minority groups here at Ball State, who were ultimately disrespected when Schnatter used the horrible language. So in this case, in resistance to change, you have the board versus the students and staff. However, this is so interesting because normally it would be the students and staff resisting change, but in this particular circumstance, it's the board that's resisting change while the students and staff actually pushed for it. And again, current research done was by Miller, and as we shift into more of the recommendations that I have for this case, I will be talking about some current research done by Yugzia in 2013 and Beyond the Boica Syndrome, Social Construction of Employee Cynicism Towards Organizational Change. So this then relates into some recommendations that I have. Yugzia mentions allowing control over change to the lower tiers of an organization. So in this case, Ball State should have reached out to some of the minority groups and even just overall students and staffs at the university and kind of allowed them to give some input in what they think should have happened in the decision on John Schnatter. There would have been a lot less resistance to this decision had had students and staff been able to control what should have happened, because obviously the petitions, the responses and messages that the university had obviously pushed for some kind of decision to be reversed and something to be changed. So you see that they took control, but they should have had control originally, which obviously would have made this situation a lot easier to deal with. Another recommendation I have were made by Witherspoon and Wohler in 1996. This is a little bit dated information, which is why I wouldn't include it in the current research. However, a couple of their recommendations within meeting with representatives of minority groups is very interesting for this case. One of them would be to appoint liaisons of minority groups. There's a lot of minority groups on campus and organizations that already stand for them and represent them, so it'd be great to have leaders come and talk with the board about how the decisions they make on certain things can affect minority groups. Another thing would be meet once a month for 6 months for the board to get an eye-opening of how minority groups actually view the world. If you could see that everyone on the board of trustees was white, so they have a very misconstrued vision of the world compared to a lot of the minority groups, meeting once a month for 6 months could absolutely help broaden those views of the world that white members are missing in the community. So overall, the Board of Trustees failed to represent minority students when they originally decided to represent John Schnatter and hold his name true to the Institute. The resistance was mainly from the board too for change, which again is really interesting in this case. And overall, had Ball State met with some representatives from minority groups on campus, a lot of issues could have been prevented, and I highly recommend that they do this in the future. Thank you.